On Draenor, old rivals sought to bring Azeroth to its knees. And while the Iron Tide was quelled, they were but servants of a more ancient foe that has not forgotten our defiance.
All right, World of Warcraft Legion. You guys went for the punchy subtitle this time around.
Yeah, it felt right for this expansion.
Well, obviously enough, you've announced it. What's the feeling? What's the feedback?
So far, there's been a ton of excitement, which we're really happy to see. We're always very nervous before we actually announce. We go through, over a year of kind of knowing what we're doing and working on it before we actually get to talk about it. So it's really cool for it to be out there.
It was really exciting being able to make this announcement here at Gamescom. I mean, in the past we've announced our expansions at BlizzCon usually, but it was, the crowd yesterday was just amazing. We were on stage looking to the back of Hall 7, and there were just people as far as the eye could see. It was incredible.
Just saying about that, actually, just touch upon it, like you're saying about all the year's work about prepping up. Is there any point, even a month before, where you guys are questioning yourselves and second-guessing yourselves about whether you've made the right decisions, the right choices?
Right. I think it's less about whether we made the right decisions, the right choices, but how much information are we giving out? Is it enough? Is it too little? Is it too much? Are we, setting ourselves up for trouble later on down the line if we're, not able to do something that we believe now that we're able to do? So that's always a consideration.
Where was the roadmap to this? Let's sort of get an idea, get a feeling for the development of this particular expansion. Where did the idea first blossom?
Right. Well, the idea first blossomed several years ago when we kind of go through these cycles of planning out multiple expansions at a time. And there was a point at which we were trying to decide the order of Legion versus Warlords of Draenor, which one would come first, which one would come second. And we had decided that the right thing story-wise was for Warlords to come first and then lead into Legion. So we've known what we were going to do with this expansion at a pretty, core level since it's 2.5, 3 years ago now or so. It was around 2012 when we were talking about that. So yeah, it's been a while.
So was it just rough sketches back then? I mean, saying about that sort of switching between the two, at that point you didn't really commence on anything massive for the development.
Exactly. I mean, I think so. The high-level concept is something that had been there for a long time, and something we've really been trying to do more and more of over time is to tie expansions together and not just have them be disconnected chunks. So we very consciously, had the threads of, let's say, Garrosh Hellscream at the end of Siege of Orgrimmar that led into Warlords, and then Gul'dan at the end of Warlords that now leads into Legion. And so, planning ahead, we're able to actually set those things up. We had a pretty solid handle on the setting, but the features are something that I think come into picture later on. Demon Hunter class, I think, is a big one there. We've always talked about, do we want to do a new class? Is it the right time for a new class? Should it be a hero class? What should it be? And I think once we were settled on the concept of Legion, we said to ourselves, if we're ever going to make Demon Hunter at any point in World of Warcraft, is there any better time ever than this? And the more we thought about it, the more it became obvious that it was just something we had to do.
But did the idea come out fully formed because you guys have been talking about it that long, or were there a lot of iteration there?
There's a lot of iteration. Nothing ever comes out fully formed. Not even the name of the expansion. So, it goes through a kind of a long development process. I was talking here at Gamescom last year about how we already had 2 zones in production. And so there are things that get kind of a longer running head start. All the different elements of the expansion have sort of different start times and end times, and it has to all just come together at the end.
Since you brought it up, I am curious now. What were some of the rejected names for this?
Let me see.
It just plays on Legion. There wasn't something
because we did settle on Legion about 2 years ago, so I don't want to say. Okay,
that bad, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, talking about Demon Hunters, let's talk about the new map, the new Isle. Again, fully formed, is this something you guys iterated on? What did you want to bring? Was it something you wanted to bring different for the players?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We started with the Tomb of Sargeras, and that was the anchor for all of this. We knew that that was going to be kind of the central hub of this, set of spokes around it, and we really mined out Warcraft's history and the lore, and what are some of the places near that we would like to visit. What are some of the cultures we would like to visit? And I think early on, I mean, the Tomb of Sargeras, before it became the tomb of this, Dark Titan, was actually a temple to Elune in our lore, the night elf goddess of the moon. And there was this heavy night elf civilization all around. And it's actually been a while since we've really explored that look, that culture. And particularly after, orcs and sort of the heaviness of themes in recent years, it felt like a great direction to go. And that sort of guided a lot of what we were doing with our zones. And then there were some natural additions like Naga in, sort of the tidal pool, lower-lying coastal areas of Azuna, Vrykul up in the mountains of Stormheim, and it all just kind of came together.
With that sort of distinct variety between the different regions.
Exactly.
It's interesting for us because, like I was saying before, with us having planned what this expansion at its core was, simultaneously with planning Warlords of Draenor, and we hear a lot during Warlords that, oh man, it's just so much, orcs and we're like, oh god, just wait, it's not always going to be that way. There's going to be a change of pace. It's going to be okay. So it's a relief to finally have that out there.
I was going to say, I mean, after all this time, you guys must be used to the sort of balance in between the community and what you guys have set up, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitably, we're always in that position that Tom mentioned earlier, where we know what the next thing is because we have a plan, because we're working on it. We're not quite ready to talk about it just yet, and it's always a bit agonizing. And it's at the same time a great relief to just have it all out there and to let the community and the players see how it all comes together.
New level cap, right number, or has there already been complaints?
Right number, I think. It feels like a good increase. The 10 level increments feel pretty satisfying, we find, and it's not too much. So,
and sort of with the Myth-forged weapons, can we sort of elaborate a little bit on that and what you wanted to see what those would bring into Warcraft?
So the artifacts, you mean? Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, artifacts ultimately represent an alternate advancement, an alternate progression system that is going to allow players to customize their weapons and their abilities. And it's, like I said in the presentation, these weapons are kind of their companion through exploring Legion. And it's a way to actually add a lot more depth and choice and complexity even to your decisions, to your class abilities, in a way that is sort of tied to the artifact rather than permanently bloating your character and having us add, dozens of new talents or something along those lines. It's something that, players, even after they've hit max level, are going to have ways to continue to progress and have a way of making themselves more powerful that's not just item level and the gear they're getting from dungeons. It's a whole new path that kind of transcends some of the traditional structures of the game.
Is that the ongoing concern with you guys, progression, how you can offer it to player and how to make it new and inventive?
It's definitely a huge part of what we do. I mean, at its core, we're an RPG, right? And that's, in a lot of ways, what RPGs are about. And so it is very fundamental, and we find that when we do that well, we have, the game does better, and people are happier and having more fun. If we don't do it well, then they're not having as much fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think and it's about sustaining that. I think, there's no question. Players often tell us they have the most fun during the first, month of the expansion when everything is out there to do and everything is relevant. And then as it focuses in on an item-centered endgame and it's all about just increasing your item level, the options in terms of what you can do to progress become narrower and narrower. Artifacts, I mean, we have other plans for that system as a whole, but artifacts in particular are just this whole alternate path that's always going to remain relevant no matter what type of content you're doing, and it just keeps the world interesting and rewarding.
I just actually want to linger, because I brought it up before the interview, about this piece of artwork, because, again, you guys create phenomenal stuff. I mean, it is just absolutely gorgeous. I just want to sort of touch upon, maybe it may not necessarily be you guys sort of can go into depth about this, but in terms of creating a single piece of art, an iconic piece of art that represents this new expansion, what's the sort of balance, or how do you work it out?
Well, I mean, really, that's driven by our art team, and kudos to them because they are absolutely world-class, amazing. And we have a variety of different ways that we approach it. We usually are developing key art for a couple different things. For example, we have usually like a piece to illustrate, like over there, Illidan. We have a piece that was developed by Alex Horley, somebody that's done work for us for a long time also, that kind of shows, I showed it at the very end of the presentation the other day, and it had kind of Illidan fighting against Gul'dan. We also have another piece that we've developed for BlizzCon as sort of the key art for that. So there are a lot of different parts of it that kind of go simultaneously, and I think it's the group of all of them that end up defining what that sort of iconic look for the expansion is.
Yeah, I largely agree. I think it's about focusing in on what the fantasy is, and our artists do such a great job of capturing that and distilling it down. I think if you think back to Warlords of Draenor and that, the warlords just lined up like that, imposing and menacing, that summarized what that was all about. Here, this is about, it's a mix of demons and Fel, but also the Night Elves, also Illidan, also some other themes that we'll be seeing, and tying all that together is a challenge, but fortunately our artists are up to it.
We just sort of touched a little bit on subscriber numbers. Obviously, announcement that whilst you guys have a huge number of people still out there, there's a bit of a drop. Again, is that an ongoing concern, or do you see that as just a case of there's always going to be a state of fluctuation?
Well, there is always going to be a state of fluctuation, and what we really try to focus on the most is making sure that our players are happy and having fun, and that people are excited about the game, and that's how we evaluate it. And when our players, are feeling like, hey, we're not doing a good enough job of whether it's delivering content, the rate of content, the type of content, the quality of the content, that's what we're going to focus on. The subscriber numbers will be what they will be. There are a lot of things that affect that in terms of the number of people that are new to the game at any given time, people that are former players coming back. There are a lot of things that all kind of make up that number. Some of them that aren't really under our control. So it's really that we want the player base to be happy and in love with the game.
Is that sort of pressure to try and almost second guess the players to what they would be after to make it more exciting? Is it more a case of bigger, better, really, to sort of bring them back in?
Better in a lot of ways, not necessarily bigger, actually, because I don't think that in a lot of ways it's hard to look at the World of Warcraft and say that game is not big enough. There's not enough stuff. It's more a question of how we use that stuff and how replayable is stuff and how much. How are the progression systems and reward systems all lining up to make a satisfying experience? Are players social enough? Is there the right mix of social activity and single player activity? That sort of stuff. So I think it's really the way that we leverage all of it that ends up mattering more than just the quantity of it.
And this sort of loops back around to the progression system we were talking about earlier on. I mean, is it a case of there's always more you could be doing, there's always more tweaks you could be doing, there's more gameplay you could be rolling out?
Always, and I think one of the struggles, obviously, working on a live game is that we are incredibly committed to quality, but at the same time, that can't come at the expense of quantity, of getting things in players' hands. If we're slaving away at something, making it perfect, and players are starving for content, that's not doing the right thing by players. And so ultimately, it is about striking that balance between a compelling world, a new place to adventure in, and then reasons for the content to stay relevant, to stay interesting over time. I think we saw with Warlords, it was an incredibly successful expansion launch. Millions of people came back to the game, were tremendously excited up front, and I think we need to make sure that we're delivering on that in the long term and giving people reasons to keep playing the content they enjoy so much, and also more of it to do.
That's sort of long term. Let's talk short term to sort of wrap up. Obviously, you guys have been locked in this rather nice room for a couple of days, but you're going to head back to studio, obviously, and the Gamescom. So, immediate future, what's the roadmap? What's the focus?
Well, the immediate future will be, we're already in our internal alpha at the office, and so it's trying to get that as far along as possible in order to prepare for beta, because that'll be when we start to bring people from the public in to try it out also, and then that'll be a long process that goes through all the way till release with more and more stuff and changes and all that kind of good stuff. So finishing alpha, getting into beta.
Just same for you, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically exactly what we've been doing with one big change. I think a lot more listening. Now the community can actually participate and voice their opinions and thoughts on this because we've actually been able to talk about it for the first time. So we're scouring forums, threads, other sources to see what people are most excited about things like artifacts, class orders, the Demon Hunter, and making sure that that's kind of reaffirming that we're on the right track.
And then just sort of final question from short term back to long term. You even, again, having sketches for the potential next thing, the next expansion, or is it still just, right, let's just get this over and done with? Oh yeah, right there.
We are already well in process on the next expansion, so, yeah.
Listen, guys, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Obviously, for more on World of Warcraft, keep it connected to Gamereactor.
The Burning Legion.